Midnight, June 14th, 2005. A security radio crackles inside a Bel Air mansion. Room check, second floor, Cross residence. No answer comes back. A guard named Thomas Reyes climbs the staircase. He's been on this detail for 3 years. He knows the house. He knows the girl usually leaves a nightlight on, a small amber glow under the door. Tonight, the gap under the door is dark. He knocks twice. He opens the door. The bed is empty, sheets thrown back like she'd simply gotten up. The window is open 6 inches. The screen has a clean vertical slit, knee-high, the kind a knife makes in one deliberate pass. 8-year-old Amanda Cross is gone. Below her window, 200 guests are still drinking champagne. A jazz trio is playing near the pool. String lights hang over the water, and somewhere past the hedge line, a valet is parking a Bentley. Nobody downstairs knows yet. For 6 more minutes, the party continues while a child is already missing. Reyes will later tell investigators that those 6 minutes are the part he can't let go of. "I stood in that doorway," he said, "and for a second I thought maybe she was in the bathroom. I didn't want to be the guy who ruined a 200-person party over nothing." He checked the bathroom. He checked the closet. Then his flashlight passed over the edge of the bed skirt, and he saw something small and pale half-tucked beneath it. A worn cotton blanket, the one Amanda had slept with since infancy, the one her mother had kept even after Amanda outgrew needing it in her arms. It was on the floor, not the bed. Reyes left it exactly where it lay and radioed it in. The 6 minutes ended. Amanda's mother, a Hollywood actress adored across 2 decades of film, had died 8 months earlier. Heart failure, sudden, at 44. She left behind 1 daughter and 1 fortune, just over $40 million, tied up in insurance payouts, real estate, and residual film royalties. Amanda was the sole heir. She was also 8 years old. Someone had to control that money until she came of age. The court appointed her stepfather, a film producer named Richard Voss. His last 3 projects had failed at the box office. His production company owed money to 2 banks. On paper, he was drowning. Then his stepdaughter's inheritance put him in charge of $40 million. "We want to be upfront with you before we go further. If you're new to this channel, we reconstruct real missing persons cases from court records, police files, and interviews, and we're glad to have you here. If this is your first time watching Archive 26, consider subscribing. We publish a new case every week." Voss was hosting the gala that night. Investors, studio executives, a security firm posted at every entrance. The Cross estate had cameras on the driveway, the pool, and the front gate. It had none inside the house. Voss himself had made that decision 2 years earlier, telling the housekeeper it was for the family's privacy. The housekeeper's name was Delia Fuentes. She'd worked for Amanda's mother since Amanda was 2 years old. She wasn't at the gala that night. Her shift had ended at 8, but she would later tell detectives something that haunted the case for years. Amanda had asked her, 3 nights before the party, whether a person could disappear from inside their own house. "I told her that was a silly question," Fuentes said. "I told her nothing happens in her own house. I've thought about that conversation every day since." By 12:40, the mansion was sealed. By 1:15, the first LAPD patrol unit arrived, headlights sweeping across a driveway full of parked luxury cars. The family's longtime estate attorney, a woman named Grace Halloran, arrived at 1:50 a.m. in a coat thrown over pajamas. She would later tell investigators that Voss met her at the door before she'd even reached the steps, not asking about Amanda, but asking whether the guardianship paperwork on file would need to be refiled if the child wasn't found within 30 days. Halloran said she remembers thinking the question was strange enough to write down in her own notes that same night, before she understood why it mattered. By 3 a.m., the Bel Air Hills were lit with searchlights, and a helicopter was circling the canyon behind the property. its beams sliding over eucalyptus and chaparral that hadn't seen rain in months. Voss stood on the front lawn in a wrinkled tuxedo, barefoot, telling detectives he'd checked on Amanda himself at 10 p.m. She'd been asleep. He said the guest list was the entire industry, people he trusted, people with nothing to gain from harming a child. A patrol sergeant named Diane Okafor was among the first officers on scene. She remembers Voss's hands. Not shaking from fear, she said years later, reviewing her own notes from that night. Shaking the way your hands shake after you've been gripping something too hard, for too long, and you finally let go. 2 days later, he sat across from a CNN anchor. His hands shook again, this time on camera, for the whole country. His voice cracked on the word daughter. He said an intruder had come across the roof, cut the window screen, and taken her while 200 people danced below. The anchor who conducted that interview, a veteran correspondent named Elaine Marsh, no relation to the security contractor who would later reopen the case, recalled the moment decades afterward. He cried exactly when the cameras needed him to cry, she said. Not before the question, not after, on the beat. I've interviewed a lot of grieving parents in my career. Grief doesn't usually keep that kind of time. Investigators found the roof access. They found the cut screen. What they did not find in 6 months of searching was a single trace of the child. A note to our viewers. This program reconstructs a fictional case inspired by patterns seen in real missing persons investigations. Details, names, and events are invented for this story. Any resemblance to real individuals is coincidental. We'll return to the Cross case after this. Search dogs worked the canyon behind the mansion for 11 days. Cadaver units and live scent teams both ran the terrain. On day 9, a handler named Kurt Ambrose and his dog, a Belgian Malinois named Scout, picked up what looked like a strong scent trail along a service road half a mile from the property line. For 4 hours, the search felt, for the first time, like it might actually end. Ambrose radioed it in as a priority track. Teams converged. The trail dead-ended at a turnaround where the road met a state highway on-ramp, the kind of place any scent naturally scatters into passing traffic. Ambrose has never fully let go of that afternoon. You train for years not to get your hopes up on a single track, he said. That day, I got my hopes up anyway. Scout worked that road like he had her, and then we hit the highway and just nothing. I drove home that night and sat in my truck in the driveway for 20 minutes before I could go inside and tell my wife it didn't pan out. The FBI joined the case in the second week. Standard procedure once a kidnapping crosses into federal jurisdiction and a ransom call becomes possible. No ransom call ever came. That detail bothered investigators more than anything else. A wealthy family, a missing heir, and no demand for money. Kidnappers who take a child for ransom want contact. Silence pointed somewhere else. Detective Ray Alcaraz caught the case. He'd worked LAPD's robbery-homicide division for 19 years, and by his own account, the Cross file was the one he took home with him every night for the better part of 2 years. The screen was cut from the inside, Alcaraz would say, decades later, reviewing his own case notes on camera for the first time. Not the outside. Whoever staged that scene made one mistake. They cut it the wrong way. A knife pushed through from inside a bedroom curls the fabric outward. This curled inward. Somebody wanted us looking at the roof instead of the hallway. He pursued that inconsistency for weeks. He requested lab analysis on the screen fibers. He requested Voss's phone records, his bank statements, his production company's books. What came back was a portrait of a man 2 months from personal bankruptcy, suddenly the custodian of a fortune he had no legal claim to unless something happened to the one person standing between him and it. The security guard on duty that night, not Reyes, but a second contractor named Wallace Bird, posted at the perimeter gate, gave 3 different timelines across 3 interviews. First he said he'd checked the perimeter at 11, then he said 11:30. Then he admitted he'd left his post near midnight to help carry ice to the bar, at Voss's personal request. Mr. Voss asked me himself, Bird told detectives, according to the file. Said the bartender was short-staffed. I figured it's the boss, it's 5 minutes. Alcaraz timed the walk from the ice room back to the perimeter gate. 4 minutes and 40 seconds, round trip, at a fast walk. It was enough. A groundskeeper named Oscar Ibarra added a smaller, stranger detail. He told detectives that the service road behind the property, the same road where Ambrose's dog lost the scent, showed tire tread marks the morning after, from a vehicle that matched none of the household staff's cars, none of the 200 guest vehicles logged at valet, and none of the property's own trucks. The FBI photographed and cast the tread. It matched a common commercial van tire sold at auto shops across California. It was never matched to a specific vehicle. It sat in the case file for 20 years, a piece of physical evidence that proved something had happened on that road and proved nothing about who. Fuentes told detectives something that never made it into the press at the time. She said Amanda had told her, weeks before the gala, that she was scared of her stepfather. Not of violence, not exactly. Amanda struggled to explain it, the way children do when the fear is more instinct than incident. She said he watched her like he was waiting for something, Fuentes recalled. Alcaraz followed up on the statement immediately. Fuentes was fired 1 week later over what Voss's lawyers called performance issues, a discrepancy in the household's petty cash log that Fuentes insisted she'd never touched. She left Los Angeles for her sister's home in Fresno and, for years, stopped returning police calls. What do you make of a witness who goes silent the moment she becomes inconvenient? We're curious how you'd read that. Estate attorney Grace Halloran pushed back hard against Voss in the months that followed, filing a formal objection to the guardianship arrangement on behalf of 2 extended cross-family members who wanted the estate frozen pending resolution of the case. She lost. The judge told me suspicion isn't a legal standard, Halloran said. He was right, technically. It just didn't feel right. Sitting in that courtroom, watching a man everyone quietly suspected walk out with control of $40 million because nobody could prove it in a way a court would accept. The investigation chased other leads too, the way real investigations always do. Messy, wide, mostly wrong. A woman in Sacramento called a tip line, claiming a psychic vision of Amanda in a red house near water. Detectives spent 4 days confirming it led nowhere. A convenience store clerk in Reno reported a girl matching Amanda's description buying candy with an older man. Enhanced surveillance footage showed the girl was 9 months older than Amanda and local to Reno. An anonymous letter arrived at the Cross estate 8 weeks after the disappearance, demanding $2 million for Amanda's return. The FBI traced the postmark, the paper stock, and eventually the sender, a man with a history of extortion attempts against wealthy families who had no actual knowledge of the case and folded under questioning within an hour. Each dead end cost days. Each dead end was logged, cross-referenced, and closed. This is what a real investigation looks like from the inside. Not a single thread pulled cleanly to the truth, but dozens of threads followed until they frayed to nothing. The FBI's file on Voss grew heavy that year. Bank records showing failed loans, a production company 2 months from bankruptcy, a guardianship arrangement that made him custodian of $40 million the moment the paperwork cleared. None of it was proof he'd taken his stepdaughter. All of it was motive, and motive without evidence is not a case a prosecutor can bring to trial. By late 2006, the case had stalled. The court finalized Voss's control of the estate in 2007 over Halloran's continued private objections. A judge ruled there was no legal basis to deny a court-appointed guardian his role simply because he was, in the judge's words, an unproven suspect in an unsolved case. The tabloids called it Hollywood's perfect crime, a case with an obvious suspect and absolutely nothing to charge him with. 10 years passed, then 15. Amanda Cross became a face on missing children databases, aged progressively by forensic software every few years, a digital ghost updated by machines while the real trail went cold. Alcaraz retired in 2019, the Cross file still unsolved in a drawer he kept, against department policy, in his own garage. "I told my wife I wasn't taking it home to obsess over it," he said. "I was taking it home because I couldn't stand the thought of it sitting in a warehouse where nobody would ever look at it again." His wife, Teresa, remembers it differently, gently. "He'd sit with that folder some nights and not say a word," she said. "I learned not to ask. I just made sure there was coffee." 400 miles north in a small agricultural town outside Bakersfield, a girl grew up under the name Sarah Doyle. She remembers a cramped house with drawn curtains, the smell of irrigation dust that never quite left the floorboards, no matter how often the place was swept. She remembers a man named Frank who told her she couldn't go to a real school because her family in Los Angeles had sold her, that they never wanted her, that they'd paid to make her disappear. The first time she tried to argue, she was 9. She remembers that clearly, because it was the only time. She'd asked why. If her family didn't want her, nobody had ever come looking. Frank didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. He told her that people had come looking once, and that when they found her, bad things would happen to everyone in the house, to her, to him, to the woman who cooked for them. He said it the way a person explains a rule about not touching a hot stove. Simple. Final. She never asked again. At 10, she kept a small paper diary hidden beneath a loose floorboard, 3 sentences a day at most, written small enough to fit dozens of entries on a single page. She wrote about the weather. She wrote about a barn cat she wasn't allowed to keep. She never wrote her real name, because by then she genuinely didn't remember it, but she wrote more than once a single recurring line. "I think I had a different house once." She couldn't have said where the thought came from. She just knew it wouldn't leave. At 11, a boy from a neighboring farm named Cody Reyes, no relation to Thomas Reyes at the Bel Air estate, spent a summer working the same rows as her family. He was the closest thing to a friend she had in that decade. He noticed she flinched at loud trucks. He noticed she never talked about a mother or father, only ever about Frank's rules. Once, picking citrus beside her, he asked outright if everything was okay at home. She told him she didn't understand the question. He let it go, the way 12-year-olds do, not because he didn't care, but because he had no framework for what he was actually looking at. "I think about her sometimes," Cody said decades later, after the case broke. "I was a kid. I noticed things were off. I didn't have the words for what off meant. I wish I'd told somebody, anybody. I didn't even know who I would have told." That same year, she fell seriously ill with a fever that lasted 5 days. Frank refused to take her to a hospital, worried about the paperwork a real doctor would require for an undocumented child. He treated it himself, with over-the-counter medicine and cold cloths, and told her afterward that hospitals were where they took children away from their families for good. By the time the fever broke, she'd absorbed one more piece of the story that kept her contained. Doctors were dangerous too. At 11, she tried to run. She made it as far as the county road before a truck she recognized slowed beside her. It was Frank's cousin, a man who worked the same fields. He didn't say much. He just opened the passenger door and waited. She got in, because 11 years of conditioning had already taught her that running only ever ended one way. Frank never mentioned it afterward. That silence frightened her more than punishment would have. She believed the story she'd been given, Children believe the story they're given, especially when no other story ever arrives to compete with it. By 14, she was doing farm labor under a fake birth certificate, harvesting almonds and citrus alongside adults twice her age, paid in cash that Frank collected on her behalf for safekeeping. By 17, she taught herself to disappear inside a crowd, quiet, careful, never drawing attention, because attention had always meant danger in the only life she remembered. She learned to read a room before she spoke in it. She learned to keep her eyes down in front of strangers and sharp behind closed doors. She learned, without ever using the word for it, how to survive. At 22, Frank died of a stroke in the kitchen of the Bakersfield house. Sarah, she thought of herself only as Sarah by then, stood in that kitchen for almost an hour before she called anyone. Not from grief, but because she genuinely did not know what she was allowed to do without his permission. It was the first decision of her adult life that no one else had made for her. She left 3 weeks later with $200 and no documents that would survive real scrutiny. She burned the old diary before she left, page by page, in a metal bucket behind the house. Not because she wanted to forget, she'd say later, but because she couldn't carry one more thing that reminded her how much of her own life she'd never understood. She drifted south, eventually to Los Angeles, the one place Frank had always warned her to avoid. She didn't know why he'd warned her. She just knew avoiding it had never worked, so she stopped avoiding it. She found work through a staffing agency that filled overnight and event cleaning shifts, hotels, convention centers, awards shows. Nobody asked many questions if you showed up on time and worked hard. She was good at both. Her supervisor, a woman named Priya Nandan, remembers her as the quiet one who never called in sick, never complained, never talked about her life before the job. I used to think maybe she'd had it rough somewhere. I never imagined how rough. She had no idea she was standing, night after night, inside the industry that had once belonged to her. Not everyone let the case go cold. Every June 14th for 18 years, Ray Alcaraz drove to the Bel Air Canyon where the search dogs had worked in 2005. He never told anyone why. It wasn't about finding anything, he said. The trail was long dead by year 3. It was about not letting the date pass, like it was nothing. Delia Fuentes, from her sister's home in Fresno, kept a manila folder of newspaper clippings about the case, updated every time a new article ran. In 2015, on the 10-year anniversary, a local paper ran a short retrospective. Fuentes clipped it, added it to the folder, and wrote a single line in the margin. Someone knows. She'd tried, twice, to reopen contact with the family's estate attorneys, once in 2009, once in 2016, asking whether any new information had surfaced. Both times she was told politely that the case remained open but inactive, and that there was nothing new to report. I stopped calling after that, she said. Not because I stopped caring, because I ran out of ways to make anyone listen. A journalist named Marisol Ortega, who covered crime for a Los Angeles alt weekly, revisited the case in 2021 for a podcast series on unsolved California disappearances. She interviewed Alcaraz on the record for the first time. She interviewed Wallace Bird, the former perimeter guard, now in his 60s, and still visibly uneasy discussing the 4 minutes he'd left his post. Ortega came closer to the truth than she ever realized. A source inside California's agricultural labor advocacy network, responding to her podcast, mentioned an old rumor from years earlier about an undocumented child laborer somewhere in Kern County who didn't seem to belong to anybody. Ortega spent 2 weeks trying to run the tip down. Kern County is over 8,000 square miles of farmland. The rumor had no name attached, no address, nothing but a feeling one advocate had once had and never followed up on herself. Ortega eventually let it go, filing it under leads she couldn't substantiate. She still thinks about it. I was 2 counties and maybe 5 years off, she said after the case finally broke. "That's the part that keeps me up. Not that I missed it by a mile, that I missed it by almost nothing." "I used to think stories like this needed a big break to solve them," Ortega said. "Now I think they need someone, somewhere, refusing to let the file close. Everything else is just waiting for the right tool to catch up to the people who never stopped asking." 20 years after Amanda Cross vanished, a Hollywood awards show goes live on a Sunday night in February. Every major U.S. network carries the red carpet in high definition. Security for the event has spent the past year piloting a new tool, real-time facial recognition, feeding live camera data against the FBI's National Crime Information Center Missing Persons Database. It's a pilot program, run out of a cramped operations trailer 3 floors beneath the venue, staffed that night by a contractor named Devin Marsh. Marsh had been a beat cop for 6 years before a knee injury pushed him into private security work. He took the facial recognition contract mostly for the overtime pay. Most nights, the system flags nothing more than expired warrants on parking violators near the venue perimeter. Tonight, at 6:47 p.m., a workstation 200 feet from the carpet lights up red. Match found, 99. 8% confidence. Subject, Amanda Cross. Status, missing since June 14, 2005. Marsh stares at the screen for a full 10 seconds before he does anything. "My first thought was, this thing's broken," he said. 99.8 is basically a fingerprint match. I'd never seen a number that high on a live feed before, not once in the whole pilot. He pulls the source frame anyway. A woman in a grey cleaning crew uniform, mid-20s, standing near a service entrance 20 feet from the carpet, adjusting a cart of folded linens. He runs the match again on a second algorithm, a redundancy check built into the pilot specifically to catch false positives before anyone acts on them. 99. 8% unchanged. His supervisor, a former Secret Service agent named Callum Reed working the event under contract, is standing behind him within 90 seconds. Reed doesn't ask if it's real. He asks what protocol says to do next. "Protocol says we verify before we move," Marsh told him. But protocol was written by people who never had a system this confident, flag a name that old, that big. We didn't really have a script for this. They call it up the chain. Within 4 minutes, an FBI liaison on site, a field agent named Priya Kessler, assigned to the venue for the night as standard practice at any major broadcast, is looking at the same frame. Kessler pulls the original 2005 case file on her tablet in real time, cross-references Alcaraz's decade-old notes, and makes the call herself. Within 7 minutes, 2 agents are moving through the crowd toward the service entrance, trying not to run, trying not to draw the attention of 40 television cameras aimed at the carpet 20 feet away. One of them is close enough to hear a red carpet correspondent, mid-broadcast, describing a designer's gown to a national audience, utterly unaware that 20 feet behind her, 2 decades of unanswered questions are about to collapse into a single moment. The woman in the gray uniform has no idea any of this is happening. She's folding a stack of linens near the loading dock, thinking about the bus she needs to catch at 11, and about whether her feet will hold out for the last 4 hours of her shift. An agent says her name, her real name, a name she hasn't heard spoken aloud in 20 years. She doesn't answer, because as far as she knows, that isn't her name. "Ma'am, can you step over here with us for a moment?" She goes because refusing has never once been an option in her life. Her hands are shaking, though she couldn't say exactly why. Only that federal agents approaching quietly at a job always means something is about to be taken from her. In a security office 3 floors below the carpet, an agent slides a photograph across the table. An 8-year-old girl in a blue dress, gap-toothed, laughing at a birthday party. "Do you know who this is?" She stares at it for a long time before she says anything. Her jaw tightens. She can feel her pulse in her ears. "That's not me." "We think it is." She laughs, a short, disbelieving sound, not from humor. "I've never seen that dress. I've never had a party like that." Even as she says it, some small, unplaceable part of her chest tightens at the photograph, a recognition she can't locate a source for. Retired Detective Ray Alcaraz is patched in by phone 20 minutes later, pulled out of retirement for the one case he never closed. Someone hands him the phone in his kitchen in Long Beach, and for a moment he can't speak. Then he asks the agents in the room to describe a small scar, just above her left eyebrow, from a fall off a swing set when she was 5. The agent looks. It's there. The confirmation doesn't stop with dental records either. Kessler's team locates a preserved neonatal blood sample from Amanda's mother's own hospital records, archived under California's retention rules for maternal medical files. A forensic genealogist runs a familial DNA comparison overnight, working alongside the dental match already logged from Amanda's 2004 pediatric visit. Both come back consistent within hours. 2 independent confirmations, arrived at through 2 completely different chains of evidence, agreeing without either team knowing the other's result until the numbers were compared side by side the next morning. In 20 years of this work, I've seen dental matches without DNA. The genealogist, a scientist named Priya Anand, would later note. I've seen DNA without dental. I don't think I've ever seen a case where both came back that clean, that fast, on a subject who had no idea she was even being tested. She sits in that room and hears, for the first time, that her family never sold her, that no one ever stopped looking, that a housekeeper named Delia Fuentes tried to warn police 20 years ago and lost her job for it, that the man she'd been told to fear and obey for 18 years, the man named Frank, had been paid to erase a child and replace her with a lie so complete it survived his own death. "I don't understand," she says, and it's the only sentence she manages to finish for several minutes. "I don't understand. I don't understand." An agent asks if she wants water. She shakes her head, then changes her mind, then can't drink it once it's in front of her because her hands won't hold still. She doesn't cry right away. When it comes, it isn't the way it's shown in films. No single dramatic collapse. Just a long, quiet unraveling, her shoulders curling inward, as if she's trying to make herself smaller in a room that has just made her entire life larger than she can process at once. She asks a question instead, once she can speak again. If nobody sold me, then why did I grow up thinking they did? Nobody in that room has a gentle answer for that. Alcaraz, on the phone, is quiet for a moment before he speaks. "Because somebody needed you to believe it," he says. "So you'd never come looking for the truth. And you never did. It came looking for you instead." Just after midnight, a victim's advocate offers to place one call on her behalf to anyone she'd like to speak to. Amanda has no one to name. The advocate gently offers a suggestion instead. A woman named Delia Fuentes, who has apparently been waiting 20 years for this exact phone to ring. Amanda agrees, mostly out of exhaustion, not expectation. Fuentes picks up before the second ring finishes, as if she's been sleeping with the phone in her hand for 2 decades. She says Amanda's name once, softly, like she's testing whether it's real. Amanda doesn't know what to say back. For almost 30 seconds, neither of them speaks, and the silence somehow says more than either of them could have. "I used to sing to you," Fuentes finally says, "when you couldn't sleep. Do you remember any of it?" Amanda says, "No." Then quietly, unexpectedly, she starts to hum 3 notes she didn't know she still had in her. A fragment of melody with no name attached to it in her memory, no context, nothing but the shape of it surfacing on its own. Fuentes, on the other end of the line, finishes the rest of the tune for her. While Amanda sits in that security office, learning who she really is, agents are already outside a gate in Bel Air, the same gate, the same property, 20 years later. Richard Voss is 70 now, and the $40 million is mostly gone, spent across 2 decades on failed films, bad investments, and the upkeep of a mansion that had long since outlived the fortune it was built to protect. He answers the door in a bathrobe. He doesn't ask why federal agents are standing on his porch. Some part of him, Alcaraz would later say, watching the arrest footage from retirement, looks like he's been waiting for this for 20 years. The confession, when it comes weeks later in a plea negotiation, is almost bureaucratic in its coldness. Voss admits he paid 2 men, low-level associates of Bird's cousin, as it turns out, the same network that would later relocate Amanda to Bakersfield, to fake a kidnapping in 2005. He admits the order was never to harm the child, only to remove her permanently, so the estate would pass fully into his control. He admits he never checked on her again after that night, not once, in 20 years, even as her aged progression photo circulated on missing persons flyers he must have seen. At trial, Wallace Bird testifies for the prosecution, granted limited immunity for the 4 minutes he left his post, a decision he calls, on the stand, the thing I have to live with either way, whether I talk or not. His testimony places Voss's personal instruction to leave the gate on the record for the first time, under oath, 20 years after the fact. His defense attorney argues diminished culpability, citing his advanced age and deteriorating finances. The prosecution plays the jury a recording of the original 2005 CNN interview, the tears, the cracking voice, the invented story of a rooftop intruder, set against the FBI's 2026 arrest footage of the same man, calm, almost bored, admitting the truth in a conference room. He's convicted on charges of kidnapping, fraud, and obstruction of justice. He receives a life sentence with the possibility of parole only after 30 years. A sentence that, given his age, both sides understand functions as a life sentence in practice. In the courtroom, he doesn't look at Amanda. She looks at him the entire time and later tells a victim's advocate that she wasn't looking for an apology. She was looking to see if he felt anything at all. She says she still isn't sure. Frank, full name Franklin Doyle, no relation to Amanda despite the surname he'd given her, died before any of this reached trial, but the network around him didn't. 2 of his associates, the men who relocated Amanda and enforced her isolation for nearly 2 decades, are arrested separately in California's Central Valley. One pleads guilty to reduce his sentence. The other, Frank's cousin, the man who once opened a truck door on a county road and silently waited for an 11-year-old to get back in, is convicted at trial and receives 22 years. A year after the red carpet, Amanda Cross, she's decided, slowly, to try wearing that name again, stands outside the gates of the Bel Air property for the first time since 2005. She doesn't go in. The house has since been sold to cover restitution owed under the court's judgment, and new owners live there now, unaware of most of what happened on that lawn 2 decades earlier. She stands at the gate for maybe 10 minutes, says nothing, and leaves. "I didn't need to go inside," she said. "I think I just needed to know I could stand there and walk away on my own." She met Delia Fuentes in person for the first time in 20 years on a Tuesday afternoon in April in a courthouse hallway in downtown Los Angeles. Neither of them had planned what to say. Fuentes simply put both hands on the sides of Amanda's face, the way she used to when Amanda was small, and said nothing at all for almost a minute. Amanda let her. "I remembered your hands," Amanda said later. "I didn't know I remembered anything, but I remembered your hands." She still works for now, though not in cleaning crews anymore. She says she isn't sure she knows how to stop working, how to sit still with money in an account that used to be hers before she ever knew it existed. A trauma therapist she's begun seeing tells her that's common, that identity doesn't rebuild on a court's timeline. Amanda says she understands that intellectually. She says understanding it and living it are two very different things. What she's rebuilding isn't the $40 million. Most of that is gone, spent by the man convicted of stealing her life in the first place. What she's rebuilding is smaller, and, in its own way, harder. A name, a legal history, a set of documents that finally match the person carrying them, and a handful of people. A retired detective, a housekeeper, a journalist who missed her by almost nothing, who never stopped believing there was a real girl behind a case file that everyone else had filed away as unsolvable. We'll leave you with the same question that opened this case. A scanner built to catch a stranger in a crowd instead found a woman who'd been hiding in plain sight for 2 decades, inside the very industry that stole her life. What would it take for you to believe your own family had given up on you? And what would it take to believe them again 20 years later? This has been a fictional case, inspired by real patterns in missing persons investigations, created for entertainment and reflection. Amanda Cross, Richard Voss, Delia Fuentes, Ray Alcaraz, and all individuals in this story are invented. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental. Thank you for watching Archive 26. If this case moved you, let us know your thoughts in the comments and consider subscribing. We reconstruct a new case every week.